Hello and happy remaining last week or two of 2022. I don't even know, what day is it? Hey Google, what's the day today?
It's Monday, December 19th, 2022.
Okay, the date that I'm filming this is December 19th, which means we officially have 11 days left in the year
Which has two different meanings. Starting with the most common one, which can be used as a
Anyway, like I was saying, we officially have 11 days left in the month as of the date that I'm filming this video, and so I thought it was time that I tell you guys my top 22 books that I read in 2022. And as a fun little bonus, I'm also going to tell you guys my least favorite books at the end of the video. I had, I believe, 25-star reads this year, which is really high. I feel like maybe I need to start being a little more picky with my 5-star ratings, or maybe that just means I know how to pick really good books to read. This is going to be in no particular order. Also, this video is brought to you by Squarespace, an all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your online business. I will talk more about them later. Oh, the Atlas 6, this is one of the first books I read at the beginning of this year. This book is magical realism. I loved this book so much. I just got The Atlas Paradox, which is the sequel, but I haven't read it yet. I feel like this is a really good book if you've never read fantasy but are thinking about getting into the fantasy genre. This is the first book I read that, again, I would say it's more magical realism than fantasy, but it's like a good dipping your toe into like the fantasy otherworldly vibe. It's about 6 magicians competing to get into a secret society, but only 5 of them will make it into the society. It also has really cool art in it, which I love. And all of the characters were so cunning, so smart. We get to go into multiple POVs, which I really love. And they're all competing against each other, but also forming friendships and some like implied romances. So it's really interesting getting to see into each of their minds. Reading this book made me feel smart just because of the way it's written and how like smart the characters are. Hook, Line, and Sinker. This is the sequel to What Happened One Summer. I normally wouldn't talk about the sequel of a book without talking about the first book in the series, but they can be read as standalones. And I was surprised how much I loved this book. I liked it more than It Happened One Summer. It takes place in a little fishing town. It's friends to lovers, and Fox is the male love interest, and he seems like he's just gonna be like this like player kind of guy at the beginning, but then slowly you find out more and more about his character and why he has this kind of like player reputation. And there was just such a surprising amount of depth to this book. I think this is one of the romances that surprised me the most because I thought it was going to be like a little bit shallow. He just turns out to have so much depth. The Spanish Love Deception. Okay, I know people hate this book and people love this book. I can understand why people don't love this book. People say it's slow, kind of cheesy, and it is a thick one. Okay, it's over 400 pages, which I feel like for a romance is pretty thick. But I personally really loved it. I gave it 5 stars. It's enemies to lovers and it's a workplace romance. It's about Catalina, who desperately needs a date to her sister's wedding, and Aaron, her basically sworn enemy, agrees to be her date. So it's also fake dating, and like they're going to Spain together for this wedding. He's got like to meet her family. They're stuck on this long flight together. There's just so many instances where they're forced together. I just like love this book because it has all of my favorite tropes, and I'm starting to realize I really like longer books, as long as they're not slow. But I like thicker books because I feel like we really get to know the characters way more and just get more involved in the world. Okay, A Court of Thorns and Roses. I just read this book, like just finished it a few days ago, and I freaking loved it. I know there's so much hype around it, so I went into it with really high expectations, and those expectations were met. I don't want to say too much about this because I'm reading the second book right now, and I'm actually going to make an entire video dedicated to me reading the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. So I want to save my thoughts for that video. That should hopefully be coming out soon as I finish the series, but please read this book. Please read this book. Please read this book. Okay, things we never got over. 3 thick books in a row. This is one of my like top 3 romances I read this year. I don't know why, I just liked it so much. No, actually, I do know why. It takes place in this small town. It's Grumpy Sunshine, which I like Grumpy Sunshine. I wouldn't say it's like my favorite trope ever, but I do enjoy it. What I loved is that there's a ton of plot going on outside of just the romance, and I started to realize that's also something I love in romance books. You could take out the romance and there'd still be enough interesting plot. And it also, like I said, takes place in this small town, and we really get to know all of the people in the town. And Lucy Score did such a great job of making all the townspeople unique and quirky and fun and all have a purpose in the story. And the main character, Naomi, she gets stuck taking care of her 11-year-old niece, and Knox, that like grumpy male love interest, ends up just like being so cute when he interacts with the niece. And like something about grumpy men interacting with children, it just makes my ovaries go. makes them go. None Shall Sleep, get into a little mystery here. I love this book and I feel like I don't hear that many people talk about it. It's a young adult murder mystery. It's about two teenagers. One of them survived a serial killer herself and they're recruited by the FBI to interview juvenile serial killers. It's literally two teenagers interviewing teen serial killers, which I thought that was so interesting to like really get into the psychology of these young serial killers. And then at the same time, there is a serial killer currently hunting teens. They're also assisting with that case of the active serial killer. All the like trickery and psychology was so interesting. Love Life Farms, another book I just read. This book is perfect for Christmas. I honestly don't feel like you have to read it around Christmas time, but it's definitely better to like get you in the Christmas mood to read it in December. It's friends to lovers and it's also fake dating, which is one of my favorite tropes ever. Second to enemies to lovers. And it's basically about a girl who owns a Christmas tree farm and the farm is not doing well financially. So in order to try and save the farm, she enters into a contest where the prize is $100,000. But to make the farm seem like a more romantic destination for the holidays, she lies on the applications and says she owns it with her boyfriends. Only there is no boyfriend. So she asked her best friend, Luca, to be her pretend boyfriend. One of my pet peeves is the miscommunication trope, but this book did a great job of not having miscommunication, like actually reading about two characters who have been friends for like 10 years. They know how to communicate with each other. They know how to have a healthy relationship was really, really refreshing. When Breath Becomes Air, this book is a memoir, which is different for me because I pretty much have only read fiction in the last year. And I loved this book so, so much. It's so heartbreaking, but so beautiful. It's about a guy named Paul who is in residency. He has worked all of his adult life to become a doctor and he gets diagnosed with cancer. So it's this weird thing where he's dying and he spent so much time trying to become a doctor, which he will never now become. And at the same time, he used to be the one operating on patients and now he's the one in the hospital bed being operated on. He has such a huge array of emotions towards dying, which obviously makes sense, and I feel like as the reader we go through that huge array of emotions with him. The Wicked Deep. I also haven't heard many people talk about this book. I love the cover. If you can't tell, it's silver, it's like raised up and it's shiny. It's so pretty. The like world building and imagery in this book is so cool. It's young adult, romance, and thriller. It takes place in this cursed small town called Sparrow. The curse is that centuries ago, 3 sisters were sentenced to death for witchery and they come back and they haunt the town by drowning boys in the harbor. It's so eerie. And also there's a huge plot twist at the end that I did not see coming, and I also really like the romance. A Good Girl's Guide to Murder. Everyone has heard of the series, so I feel like I don't have to talk about it too much, but in case you live under a rock and you don't know what it is, very, very brief summary. It's a young adult murder mystery with a little pinch of romance, and it's about Pip, who is basically the teen detective we all didn't know we needed. It's just so fun, great mystery, very surprising. The last book gets pretty dark, which I feel like people have mixed feelings about. I do think that it made sense for it to go to that dark place. But yeah, overall, the first 2 books are a lot lighter, fun murder mystery. It's the best series. It's talked about so much for a reason. Before we go on to the next book, I want to tell you guys about the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. I think the coolest feature that Squarespace offers is that you can really create a community aspect on your website with likes, comments, and replies. If you're somebody looking to start a book blog, this would be absolutely perfect for you. And of course, Squarespace allows you the ability to sell your products online. Another really cool feature is that you can monetize content like videos, a course, or a newsletter by creating a membership area. This will allow you to have a completely new stream of income for your business. And I created my own website. It features my different social media channels and books that I love. So you can head to squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch your website, you can go to my link to get 10% off your first website or domain. The Wall of Winnipeg and Me. Talk about a brick. This is my first ever Mariana Zapata book, and it did not disappoint. It's also a sports romance, which I love. And oh, I was about to say a trope that it is that I think is a bit of a spoiler, so I'm not gonna say it, but it's my first time reading this specific trope and I surprisingly really liked it. It's about Vanessa, who works for this football player named Aiden, and he's like pretty much cold to her, like doesn't really acknowledge her existence very much, and she ends up quitting, and then he shows up on her door and begs her to come back to work for him. Obviously incredible slow burn, which I thought would annoy me, but I think slow burn might be one of my favorite ways to read a romance because of the fact that by the time they get together at the end of the book, we know they care about each each other so much because we've seen them spend so much time together, go through so much together. That makes the payoff of them getting together so worth it. I definitely want to read another Mariana Zapata book in 2023, so let me know which one is your favorite book by her, which one should I read next. I think she could become one of my favorite authors. A Touch of Darkness, another series that I fell in love with. I don't know why I have to keep saying I love this series, this one is so good. Obviously these are my top 22 books. You guys get it, that these are all my favorites. Anyway, this series is about Hades and Persephone, and Hades is the god of the underworld and Persephone is the goddess of spring, life, flowers. You'd think that those would be so opposite, but they somehow work so well together. This book is a romance, it's Greek mythology. I love that it takes place in modern day in our world. I feel like so many Greek mythologies take place way in the past when like the Greeks were doing their Greek mythology thing, you know? But this one is modern, which I really appreciated. Also, this series is really spicy. It's really spicy. If you don't like spicy books, don't read the series. If you like spicy books that also have a really good plot, then you will like this series. Verity. This book is crazy. Colleen Hoover is crazy for this book, but also one of the most memorable books, if not the most memorable book that I read this year. Like, it left me speechless at so many parts. It's so wild. This is a thriller romance, and it's basically about Lowen, and she is a struggling writer, but then Jeremy, the husband of a best-selling writer named Verity, hires Lowen to complete the remaining books in a successful series his injured wife is unable to finish. So she moves into his house, all this weird stuff starts happening, super creepy. It's pretty dark. Definitely check the trigger warnings. And it was just like twist after twist after twist. I never ever knew what was gonna happen next. The Love Hypothesis. I actually just this morning watched Jack Edwards' video on his least favorite books of 2022, and this was one of them, and it broke my heart because I really like this book. It's fake dating, and it's grumpy sunshine. It's between a PhD student and a professor. Basically, Olive, long story short, needs to convince her friend that she's in a relationship, so she kind of out of the blue kisses Adam Carlson, her grumpy professor, and he agrees to fake date her so she can keep up this lie. And Adam Carlson is just so sweet. Ali Hazelwood, the author, actually has a PhD in neuroscience. I thought it was really interesting to have that very academic, sciencey setting that I haven't really read before. The Inheritance Games. I would say this is also in my top 3 books that I read this year. This is a full series, the Inheritance Games series. I have the 3rd book. I haven't read it yet. I really need to read it. It's young adult. It's got a romance subplot, specifically love triangle between 2 brothers. There's lots of riddles, secret passageways, mysteries, and it has a really interesting plot. It's about Avery, who's a high school student, and she finds out that this random billionaire left her basically his whole fortune, which is already insane in itself, but in order to collect the fortune, she has to live in his house with his disinherited family, 3 of which are brothers who are around her age, are all really attractive and great. Basically, the whole time she's trying to figure out why the heck this guy left her all this money. Heartbones. I don't know if this is my favorite Colleen Hoover book ever, but it's definitely up there. It's one of my favorites, and I feel like I don't hear people talk about this one as much out of all of her books. But it's about Bea, who comes from a life of poverty, and Samson, who comes from a family of wealth, and they spend the summer as neighbors and realize that money is one of the few things they don't have in common. That sounds like a really generic plot description, just that they come from like different wealth backgrounds, but there's so much that happens, especially at the end. There's a big plot twist, a big reveal, and I just thought their bond was so strong, and I just cared about Samson so much, and just like wanted the best for him, wanted to hug him. The Selection, a young adult fantasy series. Basically, in the world that they live in, there's a king and queen, and then there are caste systems that all the citizens are in. In America, the main character is in a pretty low caste, but she gets selected for the selection, and the selection is where the prince picks a group of girls to compete for his heart, and whichever one he ends up picking to marry will then become the princess. I thought this book also did a great job of balancing the romance with like the politics of the world. Book Lovers by Emily Henry, which came out in 2022. I love Emily Henry. She is one of my top authors for sure. I feel like she's the queen of banter. I love that her books have so much depth to them, but I also know they're always gonna be like happy and feel good at the same time. And one of the best things about this book is that the 2 main characters love books. Nora Stevens is a literary agent and Charlie is a book editor. Nora ends up agreeing to spend the summer in this small little town called Sunshine Falls with her sister, and who does she run into in this town? Charlie, the book editor she knows from New York. What's great about this book is that it's a grumpy, which I feel like is really refreshing. Grumpy Sunshine is cute, but like the girl is always the sunshine, the guy's always the grumpy, and I love that Nora is a grumpy grump just like Charlie in this book. The Song of Achilles, it's so bizarre to me that I read this book in 2022. It feels like I read it so little long ago. I cried in this book. The ending is so heartbreaking. It's a romance. It's also Greek mythology. This book made me realize that I really like Greek mythology, just like the myths and the gods and the whole world is so interesting. But you definitely don't have to know anything about Greek mythology going into it. I definitely didn't. But yeah, if you don't cry in this book, you have no soul. Just kidding. But also not, because it's really sad. Ugly Love, another sad one. This book will make you understand why it's called Ugly Love. It's a romance, of course, by Miss Colleen Hoover. It's about Tate and Miles, and this one is interesting because it's like friends with benefits to lovers, which I feel like I haven't read super often. Miles is also Tate's brother's friend, so we've kind of got brother's best friend, and Miles is a pilot, which isn't really relevant, but I feel like that's a really attractive job. Basically, Miles is really trying to guard his heart because of something that happened to him in the past, which is why he enters this no strings, no feelings attached relationship. We go back and forth between present day and the past to slowly learn what Miles is protecting his heart because of. Then Better Than the Movies, I don't own this book, but it's so freaking cute. It's a young adult romance. I really like this romance because it's young adult, so it's no spice if some of you guys don't like spicy books, but it doesn't feel super young to me despite the characters being in high school. It's basically childhood enemies to lovers. The two main characters grew up like disliking each other, playing pranks on each other, and the main character Liz is a huge hopeless romantic. She's obsessed with romance movies, so there's tons of rom-com references throughout, which I really loved, and she just wants to have her like movie moment at the end when she goes to her senior year prom, and it's so cute. And then Hopeless by Colleen Hoover, which I do own, but I'm letting my mom borrow right now. This book is so sad and broke my heart, but I also loved the romance so much. Like, I was actually so obsessed with this book when I first read it, and there's at least one more book in the series that I know of, so I definitely need to read that soon. The characters are in high school, but it's definitely heavy. So I don't think I would recommend it as a young adult book. Definitely check the trigger warnings before reading it. But basically it's about Dean and Skye, and they're both in high school, like I said, and they have bad reputations, so they bond over that, and they have had very troubling things happen to them. Tons of plot twist, as is signature for Colleen Hoover. It gets pretty dark, as again is signature for Colleen Hoover, and I cried so hard in this book. And now for my least favorite books of this year. You might be thinking, Ali, are you holding the Summer I Turned Pretty? Yes, you might be thinking, there's no way that's one of your least favorite books of the year. Well, yes and no. So I actually debated putting this series in my top 22 books of the year because I love the series so much. I especially love the TV show adaptation, but I have major beef with the last book in the series. So I will say as a preface, don't let the negativity I'm about to say sway you from reading the series, because I still think it's 1000% worth reading, but I have a fire in my heart of hatred for the third book. So just very briefly, if you're not familiar with the series, it's about Belly. It's a young adult. She spends every single summer at this beach house with her mom and her mom's friends, and her mom's friend's two sons, Conrad and Jeremiah, and of course we've got ourselves a love triangle. Now this series is great. It's super great. I will not be saying any spoilers, of course, but when we get to the third book, here's my beef. Number one, there was a certain character, one of the main characters, whom I love, but I felt like the author really changed his character in the third book, and he started doing things that made me so mad, and I was like, this isn't you. This isn't you. Number two, Belly has always been a little immature, which I kind of liked because she is young, so I feel like it's very fitting. But in the third book, she was just making so many horrible decisions, being so immature, that I was like, where's the character growth? And lastly, the thing I wanted to happen the whole series finally happens in the epilogue. And how long is the epilogue? I don't remember, but I do know it was short. Like, if I'm gonna read a whole series, you can let the happy ending be a little long. Okay, I'm gonna stop ranting about the last book because I could go on forever, but I did give it, I think, 2 stars. Now, the next 3 books, I did DNF all of these next 3 books, which means I did not finish them. They were so bad, I didn't even make it till the end. The first one being The Thursday Murder Club. Now, I am devastated that I DNF'd this book because the plot sounds so good, but the book was so boring. This is a murder mystery that takes place in a peaceful retirement village, and that retired group of friends call themselves the Thursday Murder Club because they love investigating unsolved murders so much, which sounds so cute. But yeah, basically, like, the whole time I was reading it, I just kept thinking, like, wait, what is going on? Because all the words were like going in one ear and out the other. Like, I don't even recall really anything I read because I was just so boring. I couldn't comprehend it. But I know that people love this book, so I feel like if you're interested in this book, you should give it a try for yourself. Then we've got The Night Circus, which I listened to as an audiobook that I also, of course, DNF'd. This book I felt conflicted on because it's beautifully written. Like, I have so much respect for this book. I just felt like there was so much world building and kind of lyrical, beautiful writing that in the beginning I fell in love with, but then it never went away. Like, I felt like I kept waiting for the plot to like really pick up, and it never did. It's very magical. It's a very cool world, cool characters. We've got this duel going on. Like, it's really set itself up to be a great book. And I think if you're somebody who wants like a slow, really flowery, beautifully written book, then you will like this book. Like, I can 100% see this being a 5-star for someone else. It just wasn't for me. And then I've also got Pride and Prejudice on this list, which I know is a classic, but I also listened to this book via audiobook, and I think that was a mistake because it's got this like old-timey language, and again, I just got so bored. I felt like I had to focus so hard on what was being said to like understand it. Not that it's hard to understand, it just, again, because of the old language, it felt like work to read. And that is all my least favorite books. Not that many of them. I felt like this year I really tried hard to pick books to read that I knew I would love. There's other books that I gave like 3+ stars, but I didn't really have a big problem with those. These are the only ones I had passionate dislike for. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Very soon, I believe right in the new year, I will have my every single book I read so far this year. And I think I've read around 90 books so far. So that should be a fun video. What would you say is y'all's favorite and least favorite book of the year? Part of me doesn't want to know because I feel like some of y'all are gonna hate some of the books that I loved, but I also do want to know, so please tell me in the comments. And yeah, with that, I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!